to briefly summarize, review what we went through yesterday in the Dharma Talk. Great trust is one of the foundations of practice. It's not a blind belief, but a trust based on our experience. And out of this, a confidence in the practice naturally grows. Could be called the universe silently smiling at itself as this confidence grows. There is also what could be called the other side, which is called great doubt. Very simply, what remains? What remains? We do not close ourselves off, suppress or repress anything. What is it that remains? Not just as a wandering thought, on the contrary, what remains in the depths of our practice? I also warned about the mind states that we might enter, the experiences, wondrous or whatever, often spoken of as kensho and so on. These can be helpful glimpses along the way, but if they are taken as anything more than that, they can be a tragic mistake. We don't want to waste our lives in delusions. In a word, what this practice, Buddhist practice, Zen Buddhist practice comes down to is the self-delusion, the delusion of a self coming to its own end once and for all. I also mentioned that nowadays, in the present situation, the problem of fatigue may be felt by many of you, feeling that you never felt before of the impermanence of life really coming home. This can be a precious opportunity to open up to what is under our own feet, what is always there, but we tend to run away from it. In a word, Zazen is the practice of stopping, of not running off into anything. Coming home to what is truly here. I stressed what could be called giving all of ourselves to the practice. There's no magic bullet, there's no magic wand. If you don't give all of yourself, you can sit till the cows come home and it won't make a bit of difference. How to give all of ourselves. I briefly said, frankly, I would like to know how you cannot give all of yourselves. Once you open up and see the marvel of this practice and see that it is what is needed to live truly and really, what else is there to do in this life? Don't waste this precious opportunity. I mentioned how in recent Dharma talks, they're online, recorded now, I've gone through the basics of the physical posture, the breath, and the mind or the mental attitude. Perhaps most essential is what is called samadhi, or a kind of concentrated oneness that is deepened and sustained. Very simply, it must come to be constant and complete. It is finally found to hold you. It's no longer your conscious attention on something As a practice, yes, this is necessary, time and again to come back. But the point is to eventually realize that this concentration, the Zen concentration, is not something that we produce, create, perfect, or enlarge. It is what is always already here. The self running away from it is the break in that concentration. I also mentioned that instead of seeking to get somewhere, anywhere in our practice, is already, in a sense, magnifying the split of the self. The only way to truly practice is not to go toward, but to come from it. We cannot practice from the standpoint of the self. It doesn't work. The self, by its nature, is split. We cannot practice from there. And all the king's horses and all the king's men cannot put Humpty Dumpty back together again. In the language of my youth, I put it, that split splits. That's the essential point of practice. When that split, that separation, that's division that is the self, it is and it isn't. It's connected, but it's separate. When that is seen through for what it is, truly let go. How to say it? That split splits. The separation is found to be gone from the very beginning. It was never there. It is not real. Where is the separation right now between you and me? Thousands of miles separate. I'm in Kyoto. And yet we're not that far apart. Forget the screen. How is this possible? When this separation is gone, the delusion of the self is gone. Here is where the true dignity, the true beauty, the truth and the goodness of life really is manifest of itself. We don't produce it. We find it in each and everything. Wondrous, marvelous, beyond compare. Here, in a sense, is where the real practice begins and where proper guidance is at least as important as in the beginning. I ended the talk yesterday by asking, what is it that really hinders you, obstructs you in the practice? Can anything really hinder this? What really gets you stuck? Where are you really stuck? Do you see that? I also mentioned to really fall in love, as we say, head over heels in love. If you've really experienced that, well, you're pretty far on your way in the Zen path. Because when you truly fall in love, you don't stand on the edge and peek in. You dive in. When you really fall in love, what is there to be afraid of? When you really fall in love, where is that separation? Gone without a trace. Isn't that precisely what love is? So don't make it out as anything more esoteric or exotic than it is. You're walking on thin ice with every step. Now, today in this Dharma talk, what I want to say, first of all, is you have all you need to complete this practice Right now, you are where you need to be. No matter what your physical or mental condition is. Of course, it helps to be able to practice properly and to extend that practice until it becomes seamless. To have the body in order, so to speak. To learn how to sit so that you can maintain this posture naturally without straining too much. The physical posture itself is a way of supporting the practice. We're not torturing ourselves. We're putting our body in a posture that is most supportive of this practice, to keep our back naturally erect, to allow the stomach to be open so that we can breathe well, the hips open, the hands placed in a way that we're not fidgeting and scratching every itch. The eyes naturally falling a few feet in front of us, because that's what would happen if we are not focusing on anything. We don't close our eyes, we don't open and look around, we just let them be half closed in front of us. This can take some getting used to, but you will see it's the natural way of the eyes being disengaged and yet there when needed. Besides the body, the breath is very valuable, very precious way to enter the practice by breathing properly, not forcing it, but with all the energy we have, just naturally breathing all the way down from the belly. Again, to exaggerate. Don't force it. Over time, it becomes slower, deeper, and longer. This really helps to bring all of the energy together in the physical center of our body, the hara or the tanden, rather than up in our head. I mentioned that by nature, the self-centered self is split. It's split from itself, from others, and from the world. The practice of Zazen is to sit, in a sense, right through that. Who makes that separation? Self and other, me and you, this and that, birth and death. Where does that separation come from? The point of this concentration, again, samadhi, one way of translating it would be a kind of concentrated oneness. This concentration is a way of bringing all of that energy together into one. You see why, because otherwise we are so used to it dispersing, spreading out into this thought and that thought, wondering about this, hoping about that, remembering this. It seems endless because the mind itself is diffused, it is split. So we naturally, with the body, with the breath, with the right attitude of the mind, bring that concentration to bear on the matter at hand. The breathing itself will do. The body in sitting in Zazen itself will do. A koan, if it's alive and breathing, will do as well, to bring it all into one. This may sound Again, difficult or perhaps impossible, but you're wrong. All you have to do is see what happens when an emergency arises. When an emergency arises, what happens? All of your concentration is right there. Something must be done. You come across an accident in the road and you have to figure out whether to move the person who is injured or get a flare out of the back of the car, the trunk of the car. What needs to be done? When it's an emergency situation, it's true, some people get frozen, go into shock, but most people are able to function from a place that is completely free of wavering mind. Where does all that, just a minute ago, driving in the car, thinking about 100 things, and then all of a sudden you smack up against this emergency. Where do your wandering thoughts go? You don't have to even get rid of them. They're gone. How does that happen? And please don't wait for an emergency for it to arise. Zazen is nothing other than that. You see? Our mind has the capacity to do it. And yet we have been tediously training it to wander off into all sorts of dispersed thoughts, ideas, expectations, and so on. An emergency shows the unreality of that whole thing in a minute, in a second. So you can stop cogitating about how difficult it is. That's just more mental masturbation. Doing what you love or being in love is the same thing. It's maybe the opposite spectrum from an emergency where the great matter of life and death is staring you in the face and you have to respond. Falling in love or just even something, doing what you love. What happens there? Is your mind full of discursive thoughts? No, there's just the beloved, or there's just the music that you are listening to or perhaps performing. Does anyone not know what I'm talking about? Well, Zazen is making that total and complete, allowing it to be what it really is. As the expression goes, you have my undivided attention. I trust you're familiar with this common English expression. In other words, I'm not going to pay attention to you, but check my cell phone at the same time and think about what's for dinner. No, you have my undivided attention. Tell me, what is that? That's what we come to when we sit and practice properly. How to say it? In the beginning, yes, we are taking this self-willed concentration, bringing it back, finding our mind wandering and bringing it back. Yes, this, in a sense, can be tedious. This practice, this discipline is necessary. Because the practice is so hard? No, because your mind is so dispersed, that's all. So by practicing properly, it shouldn't take long for you to be able to bring all of that energy together. It's quite a natural thing. If it's not happening, see what you're doing wrong and correct it. If your mind is going out into thoughts and ideas rather than into this, see what you're doing wrong and correct it. A koan naturally brings us to that, you see? The sitting itself, the posture itself, the breathing itself helps to bring us to that. This is where, again, experiences, kensho so-called, and other kinds of insights and glimpses may arise. See them for what they are and then move on. What happens when it is complete? In other words, when it's no more a matter of us consciously, as a necessary prerequisite, it's true, as a necessary discipline, bringing the mind back again and again and again. Once it becomes natural, constant, and complete, what happens when it reaches its culmination? When there's nothing more, there's nothing outside of it. It is total and complete. First of all, that concentration is now seen to be what it is. It is not something that we are bringing ourselves back to. It seemed that way in the beginning. Yes, whoops, my mind is wandering, got to get back to the koan. But when it becomes solidified, total, and complete, it becomes clear beyond a shadow of a doubt. We are not creating this, producing it, no, even perfecting it or deepening it. We are simply returning to what we could call the original nature of our mind, totally settled and concentrated. The point then is when it reaches that culmination, something will happen. A bird will chirp. The teacher may strike you if he sees that's where you're at the edge. Huh? You may stub your toe. It could be anything, but a discrete event, that concentration is now gone without a trace. Without a trace. What remains? What remains? What remains is the universe now is the self, and the self is the universe. There is no separation. That separation that you've been holding so dearly on to all this time is seen for what it is. A delusion, nothing, not a thing. To put it more precisely, I am the formless universe, the true universe, not the universe seen through my eyes. Huh? No, that's gone. So we could also say, what remains? Nothing, not one thing. And yet that not one thing comes to life in everything that is also not a thing. I call it being without self. Being without self. There is no hindrance here. There is no opposition here. There is no opposing position. There is nothing to oppose. Being without self, in other words, free even of itself. And this is what really works in the world, so to speak. Last night, evening in Japan, I guess late morning for you, most of you anyway, I used the term at the end of my talk to use it well, to use it well. And someone objected to that. They didn't understand. It sounds like now I'm going to take it up and use it. What? It didn't make sense. It was not a good choice of words, I suppose. So reconsidering, another way I would put it is, as I just said, being without self works in the world. Use it well. Well, it works seamlessly in the world with and as others. This naturally comes out of being without self. It doesn't just fall in on itself and become nothing. It falls in on itself and becomes everything, not separate from a thing. Thus, being without self, in a sense, the rest of the lifetime of practice is seeing how to work that out, being without self, working that out in the world with others who are also without self. This practice can and should go on forever. But to come to the point of being without self decisively, not a little bit, not a little peak, to be without self. This is the beginning of a new kind of practice that goes on wonderfully, marvelously for the rest of our lives, as it should. I also mentioned briefly last night, and I will repeat now. When you open up and realize for yourself that this practice is what must be done in this life, and you are ready to do it, get settled in the formal zazen posture. And of course, it's not just limited to sitting. It has got to come and work itself out naturally in the activities of our daily work, play, other responsibilities, and whatever. The division itself between practice on our cushion and the rest of our life, that also must dissolve in time. But when you come to that place where you are really settled and you realize, not because I read it in a book or somebody told me, I now know from the depths of my own being, this is what must be done in this life.
Thank you, Jeff, for your talk. I'm wondering about taking the practice off the mat. I wondered if you could say a little bit more about that, because I can see how it works if I'm just going to go and do the ironing or wash dishes. But in the reality of life, many things are happening where our attention is got to be constantly moving from one to another. Could you give advice on that, please?
Yes, as you say, it can be fairly easy to do a simple kind of manual labor ironing, or for example, the monks. You know, you see a similar thing that you mentioned in the monasteries. The monks don't just sit all day. They often are doing a kind of manual labor, picking the weeds, cutting wood to use for the fire, the wood fire, and the bath, or for the stove. Serving people meals, guests if they come to the temple. But much of it is very basic, very simple, repetitive actions. I remember when I was in the monastery, we had to go cut wood, and they had these very primitive saws, and I was the most recent arrival, so I was the last one to pick, and the one that I picked, the handle would kind of come off the saw every once in a while, which was, but it was, you know, not electric equipment, but very basic equipment. So you really have to be there with it. Ironing maybe can be a good example. It's a simple, in a sense, repetitive action. You can even be sitting at the time, but it's not zazen. You have to pay attention to the seams and so on, the temperature and whatever. But it certainly can be a kind of meditation. I trust you see kinhin, the walking meditation, is the way it is precisely because of that. It's taking this seated zazen, this settled samadhi, concentrated oneness, and allowing it to stand up and simply follow the footstep of the person in front of you. A very simple basic movement. You don't even have to know where you're going. Just follow the footstep of the person in front of you. One of the reasons, besides, of course, to stretch your legs, but more importantly, is to help that practice of sitting still be transformed into a simple physical movement. And you start to realize, aha, this too is Zazen. I didn't leave the Zazen. I'm now walking in Zazen. But the point of your question is, that's good and well, but going out into the real world as the lay people we are, decisions, compromises, misunderstandings, disagreements. I've worked at a Japanese university for the last 33, 34 years now, so I have some experience in those things. It's a Zen university, but it's a university. I would urge you, Chris, to see that that is the real dojo, the real place of practice. Sitting on your cushion or ironing the clothes, that's the easy part. It's very important. In a sense, it's essential. But to get up and then go out into the world, yes, completely losing your settled retreat high, as we call it, or whatever, going into the frazzle, Yes, exactly. That is where the practice must shine. And you are right to ask the question, because it's not easy. It's not easy. It takes time. It won't be perfect for sure. But it's a very valuable, in some sense, at least as important as this practice on the cushion, to get up and to see, what am I doing? Why am I turning that person into the enemy? This is practice, yes. If we all share the same root, and I've really experienced that, how did he become the enemy? This is practice. This is the real place of practice. So please don't worry about it. In time, you will start to see that that separation does not exist. No matter how busy, and how much turmoil you're in, it just deepens in response to it. It just deepens in response to it. So take it as the challenge that it is. There is the real dojo. And when you mess up, you just met your teacher, Chris. Does that help?
Yes. Can I add an extra question then?
Certainly.
Because when we're on the mat, we haven't to try too hard to achieve something. But when we're in the world, is there an element of trying to do, I don't know, the right thing, or trying to see that person as, the same route, as you call it? Or does it just flow from what you've done on the mat? If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say, we're not trying so hard. It's true. You don't have to try at all in the end. Zazen is not about trying, but it's not about just sitting there, twiddling your thumbs either. We're giving all of ourselves, without doubt. We have to give all of ourselves, which is more than trying.
Yeah.
It's more than trying with all your might. We're giving all of ourselves. But then to get up and to go into the world, into that confusion, to go all the way into that. And how to say it? It used to scare the snot out of me, because I spent a lot of time on the cushion in the monastery and outside. And, I was pretty happy where I was, but then have to go out there and but I realized what I was doing. I was turning the practice into a great escape. This is not practice at all. It's an escape. So I can honestly say now, when I encounter a difficulty or a challenge, I'm not looking for trouble, but I realize I've just met another teacher. I've just been able to see a blind spot a weakness, and there are plenty of them. Huh? So it sounds strange, but you can actually come to look forward to that. To look forward to that. This is a chance for me to learn. Where is my blind spot? Why am I still making the same mistake? This is where the practice really comes alive. I don't know if that answers your question. If not, please feel free to.
No, that is very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for your talk, Jeff, and your answers. I've been practicing with this phrase, what must be done now? And you have mentioned it several times in your talks yesterday and today. And the way I've come to see it at the moment is, at the beginning of practice, I ask myself, what must be done? What do I need to do in order to, get it right or not to suffer? And then over time, I realized that it's a bit of a word play, if you like, that what must be undone is the question. What must be undone? And that is the self and what you've been talking about, the split, etc. And then, when everything is undone, the question arises again, what must be done now?
Yes.
If that makes sense. What I'm experiencing at the moment is that it switches from the first, what must be done, what do I need to do right now, and letting the other, what must be done, arise, if that makes sense. It's for letting the source come to speak and ask what must be done. There are these moments where that is clear, and then all of a sudden it seems like that split self asks, am I doing this right? And what must be done now? So it feels like still a split, still a switching from one to the other, and drives me potty.
There's a way of asking such that the mind disperses. It goes out into, for example, possibilities. What must be done? Well, let's see, I could iron the clothes, or I could do dishes, or I could take a walk, take a nap, I could do zazen. But this kind of practice is, in a sense, the opposite. It's a way of going like this. And as you suggest, Marcus, asking, the source is asking directly into itself. It's not dispersing out into, you see what I mean? This is what must be done. It's the source asking into the source itself. This is one reason why I recommend what must be done. Questions like what is this? What must be done? What remains? What is lacking? Or for many people, who? Who is this? Who is behind it all? Who am I really? These kinds of questions, but again, not, oh, who am I? Well, let's see, my parents gave birth to me, and of course their parents, that's endless. It's got, again, to be asking into the source itself. What and who is really helpful here? You follow, Marcus?
Yes. Yes.
And I tend not to use questions like, why? Why does this happen? Why is the mind, or how? How do I do this? I trust you can see why, huh? Because those kinds of questions tend to lead us back into our head, conceptualizing considering possibilities, and so on. You see, it's in a sense going in the opposite direction. So what must be done right here and right now? Huh? What must be undone? It's not really two different questions. Huh? When it has been undone, as you suggest, huh? In a new way now comes that question again. Now, what must be done? I've sat through, not a doubt. Now it's time to get up and iron the clothes. There finally is no division anymore. Huh? The sitting gets up and does what must be done. When nothing must be done, relax, enjoy yourself, take a walk. Do you want to say anything else, Marcus?
No, I'm very grateful for your answer. Thank you very much.
Jeff, and this is the question that has been with me for years and years, I suppose. It's about expectations. So the first part of your talk, which was about sort of sitting regularly, and I love the bit about it's like being in love. I get that. I love sitting, and I really do. And I love trying to take it out into life. I even kind of love trying to understand why I might be making something into an enemy. And the stuff about a complete change is just nonsense to me. I just can't get a handle on it at all. I just stay the same old person. Well, maybe I mature a bit, maybe I don't, but I just can't get it. What do I do? What do I do with it, Jeff? Do I just live with that tension?
Maggie, before long you will see that trying to become someone or something else is precisely the self-delusion. Huh? What are you trying to be? What are you trying to change into?
That thing that you talked about, you know, like there's no division between me and everybody else.
Letting go of that delusion.
That there's a division.
Yeah, the division or the delusion, huh? It comes down to the same thing, huh? Letting go of that. Yes, yes. And then you will become a completely new and wonderfully perfect person, right, Maggie?
Sort of.
No.
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
Well, that's your delusion. That's your delusion. It's the very need to be or have someone or something else that must be let go of, Maggie. That's what you're still holding on to. You are fine as you are, but you cannot accept that. It's not Zen's fault. You are still struggling with that. Well, struggle until there is no doubt, until there cannot be a shadow of a doubt. You are exactly what you need to be. Are you ready to say that from the bottom of your heart, Maggie?
I say thank you to you for saying it.
Well, you practice until you can say it yourself.
Well, I'll have a go. Thank you.
Thank you. And if something seems like nonsense, you keep an eye on it, all right?
Bless you. Thank you.
Bless you. I look forward to practicing together before long, Maggie.
I just want to express my gratitude for the questions that have been asked this evening. Jeff, a number of the questions have touched on the dilemmas that we grapple with in our lives. Could you speak something about the degree of patience that's required to sit morning, night with these dilemmas to find how we should respond to them?
Well, in a word, a lot more patience than I have, Leonie. If there's one thing I learned in the last 40 or 50 years, it's patience. But patience comes with the practice, doesn't it?
It
In
does.
the beginning, we may be desperate. I was desperate. I wasn't coming to take 20, I was coming to do what needed to be done. I was desperate. It couldn't be helped. And that had its strengths. It also had its weaknesses. So over the years, I learned the virtue of patience. The very idea of being in a hurry to get somewhere is something you might want to consider deeply, Leonie. Where are you trying to get to? Where are you impatient to get to? You follow? When I first started doing the formal koan practice, I ended up in a tradition that hasn't, about 2,800 koans. It's about as many as you can imagine. They don't throw anything out. The kind of guy I am, I thought, geez, I should have gone into a tradition where they didn't have so many koans. It was, the real basic stuff, and I could really grapple, as you say, with that stuff, but it's all this really extremely detailed koans, and then comments on that, and then capping phrases for that. It seemed endless. But over the years, I realized this is the kind of practice I need. Because I was so impatient, in such a hurry to get to the end. And then by going through this, what seemed like an endless process, over the years, it became clear. Oh. So, no, Leonie, I'm not saying that you need 2,800 koans. One will do, but patience is a virtue, and I wouldn't worry about it too much. From what I know of you, you couldn't have done 1/10 of the things that you've done in your life without patience. And you know that as well as I.
Thank you, Jeff. I suppose it's more that when we grapple with some of the dilemmas and troubles that we do on a day-to-day basis, that it doesn't seem like the appropriate response to them becomes clear very quickly.
Yes.
Not quick enough.
Be patient, as you suggest. Be patient, be sincere, and be humble. And you are already those three. Continue on, just as you are.